I sat in my childhood home, watching everyone gather around the Christmas tree. The familiar scent of pine and cinnamon filled the air, but my mind was focused on the envelope in my hand. Inside was a check covering 3 months of rent for my brother Jake. We had always been competitive, but this gift was different. This was my olive branch after years of tension. I never expected what would happen when he opened it. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever tried to help someone who didn't want it. Growing up with Jake was like living in a constant shadow. 3 years older, he was everything. I wasn't athletic, naturally charming, and effortlessly popular. While he collected trophies and girlfriends, I collected academic achievements that seemed to disappear into the background noise of our family dynamics. "Great job on your science project, Elijah," my mom would say, before quickly adding, "Jake, what time is your game tonight? We need to make sure everyone gets there early to get good seats." That was the rhythm of our childhood. Jake scored the winning touchdown, and the family celebrated for days. I won the state science competition, and it warranted a quick congratulation before conversation shifted back to Jake. Our parents never meant to play favorites, at least that is what I told myself. But the evidence mounted year after year. Jake got the bigger bedroom because athletes need more space to stretch. He got a car on his 16th birthday because he had so many practices to get to. When my 16th birthday rolled around, I was told I could use the family car when nobody else needed it. By the time I reached high school, I had accepted my place in the family hierarchy. I focused on academics, knowing it was my ticket out. While Jake was being scouted by college football programs, I was applying for academic scholarships across the country as far from Ohio as possible. "You are really going to California?" my father asked when I announced my college decision. "That is so far. Are you sure that is necessary?" What I didn't say was that the distance was precisely the point. I needed space to become someone outside of Jake's shadow. At 18, I left home and barely looked back. Visits became shorter and less frequent. Phone calls with my parents were brief and superficial. I built my life deliberately studying computer science, working internships at startups, and eventually founding my own software company by 25. From the outside, it looked like I had it all: financial success, professional recognition, and independence. Meanwhile, Jake's story took a different turn. The football career ended with a knee injury his sophomore year of college. He bounced between jobs, never finding the same glory he had experienced in high school. Our parents supported him through it all emotionally and often financially. I learned about Jake's most recent struggles during one of my monthly calls with my mother. Her voice carried that familiar, worried tone she always had when discussing Jake. "He lost his job at the construction company," she sighed. "Third one this year. And now he is behind on rent again. Your father and I would help but with the medical bills. My father had been diagnosed with early-stage prostate cancer earlier that year. While treatable, the treatment wasn't cheap, and their retirement savings were taking a hit. Has Jake asked for help?" I inquired already, knowing the answer. "You know your brother," she replied. "Too proud to ask, but he keeps mentioning how he might get evicted." "He would never ask you directly, Elijah. But maybe if you offered." That was the pattern. Jake would never ask for help, but he would make sure everyone knew he was struggling. Then he would reject the help when offered, only to complain later that nobody supported him. Despite our history, he was still my brother. And despite everything, I still wanted his approval in some fundamental way I couldn't quite shake. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe a gesture big enough would finally earn the respect I had been seeking since childhood. So I made the decision. This Christmas, I would give Jake something he truly needed. Not a token gift. Not something symbolic, but something substantial that would actually help him get back on his feet. 3 months of covered rent would give him breathing room to find another job without the immediate threat of eviction. As the holiday approached, I felt nervous anticipation building. I hadn't been home for Christmas in 2 years, using work as an excuse to send gifts rather than deliver them in person. But this year was different. This gift needed to be given face to face. I spent weeks shopping for everyone else in the family. A leather wallet for Dad, a cashmere sweater for Mom. But Jake's gift required more preparation. I called his landlord directly confirming the monthly amount. I wrote a check large enough to cover 3 months and tucked it into a card with a simple message: "Everyone needs a break sometimes. No strings attached. Merry Christmas." As I drove the familiar route back to my parents' house in Cincinnati, I rehearsed potential scenarios in my head. Would Jake be gracious, embarrassed, angry? I prepared responses for each possibility, determined that this time I wouldn't let our old patterns ruin the moment. The moment I pulled into my parents' driveway, I felt the familiar knot in my stomach tighten. The house looked exactly the same Christmas lights hanging from the gutters, the same wreath on the front door, the same welcome mat that had been there since I was in middle school. It was as if time stood still in this place, while the rest of my life had rushed forward at lightning speed. Mom opened the door before I could even knock, wrapping me in a hug that smelled like sugar cookies and the perfume she had worn since I was a child. "Elijah, you made it. Come in, come in. It is freezing out there." Dad stood behind her, offering a firm handshake that turned into an awkward half-hug. "Good to see you, son. The drive okay?" "No problems," I replied, stomping snow from my boots. Traffic was light. And then there was Jake hanging back in the doorway to the living room, a beer already in hand, despite it being only 2 in the afternoon. He looked older than his 31 years, with new lines around his eyes and a weariness to his posture that hadn't been there the last time I saw him. "Hey, genius," he said, using the childhood nickname that had once been affectionate but had turned sarcastic somewhere in our teens. "Decided to grace us with your presence this year. Good to see you too, Jake," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. Next to him stood a woman I didn't recognize, petite with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. "This is Allison," Jake said, putting his arm around her shoulders. "My girlfriend." I extended my hand. "Nice to meet you, Allison." "Jake has told me so much about you," she said with a genuine smile that made me wonder exactly what Jake had shared. "Your parents are so proud of everything you have accomplished." I caught Jake rolling his eyes behind her and chose to ignore it. Throughout the afternoon, I observed Jake carefully. He looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from more than just lack of sleep. His clothes were worn but clean, and he kept checking his phone nervously, as if expecting bad news. During dinner, I overheard him talking to our uncle about his job situation. "The construction industry is just dead right now," he explained, reaching for another roll. "Nobody's fault. My boss said he will call when things pick up again, but who knows when that will be." "Have you thought about trying something different?" our uncle asked. "Your cousin Brian just started at that insurance company, and they are always hiring." "I am not a desk job kind of guy," Jake replied defensively. "Besides, the right opportunity will come along. It always does." I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to point out that waiting for the right opportunity wasn't going to pay his rent. As dinner progressed, Jake made several comments about my success, each one tinged with resentment. "So how is life in the big fancy tech world?" he asked loudly across the table. "Still making millions by typing on a keyboard all day. The company is doing well," I answered carefully. "But it is a lot of hard work. More than just typing." "Yeah, must be tough deciding which yacht to buy." He laughed, and a few others at the table chuckled uncomfortably. By the time we gathered in the living room for the gift exchange, the tension was palpable, at least to me. Our family had always done gifts one at a time, with everyone watching as each person opened their present. It was a tradition that felt especially daunting this year. We went around the circle, each person taking their turn. Mom loved her sweater. Dad appreciated the wallet. I received a nice watch from my parents and a generic gift card from Jake and Allison. I couldn't help but notice that despite his financial troubles, Jake had bought expensive gifts for everyone, a designer purse for mom, golf clubs for dad. It seemed he was still trying to be the generous, successful son, even when he couldn't afford it. Finally, it was my turn to give Jake his gift. My heart pounded as I handed him the envelope. It was plain and white with just his name written on the front. "What's this?" "Looks official," he joked, tearing it open with none of the care I had taken in preparing it. I watched his face as he read the card, then looked at the check inside. His expression shifted from curiosity to understanding, and then to my horror to anger. His jaw tightened, and a flush crept up his neck. Looking around the room at our assembled family, he held up the check and announced in a voice dripping with sarcasm, "Well, would you look at that? Little brother is paying my rent. Tries to compensate for the fact that he's not needed by this family." The room erupted with laughter. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all laughing at what they perceived as a joke between brothers. But Mom wasn't laughing. She looked horrified. And I felt the blood rush to my face, a mix of embarrassment and hurt washing over me. Without a word, I reached over and took the envelope from his hand. "Useful to know," I said quietly, tucking it into my pocket. The laughter gradually died down as people realized this wasn't a joke. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. I stood up, mumbled something about getting some air, and walked out to the front porch, closing the door firmly behind me. The cold air hit my face like a slap, but I welcomed it, anything to cool the burning humiliation I felt. I sat down on the porch, swing the same one Jake and I had fought over as kids, and tried to process what had just happened. I had offered help, genuine no-strings-attached help, and Jake had thrown it back in my face in the most public, humiliating way possible. The worst part wasn't even the rejection. It was the revelation that after all these years, all my accomplishments, all my efforts to prove myself, my brother still saw me as nothing more than an outsider trying to buy my way into the family's good graces. The front door opened, and I braced myself for my mother's well-meaning but ineffective attempts to smooth things over. Instead, it was Allison who stepped out, wrapping her coat tightly around herself. "Mind if I join you?" she asked tentatively. I gestured to the empty space on the swing. "I wanted to apologize for Jake," she said after sitting down. "What you did was incredibly generous." "Apparently not welcome, though," I replied, trying to keep the bitterness from my voice. Allison sighed her breath, visible in the cold air. "He is drowning, Elijah. Not just financially. He lost his job 3 months ago, not 2 weeks, like he told your parents. We had to sell his truck last month to make rent. And yesterday his former college coach died, the one who stuck by him after his injury. I hadn't known any of this." Jake had always been careful to control the narrative, showing only what he wanted people to see. "Jake has always defined himself by what he could give others," she continued. "Being the one who needs help instead of giving it. It is killing his pride. Especially coming from you." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, though I already knew. "You're the success story, the one who made it on his own. He compares himself to you constantly, even though he would never admit it." I let her words sink in, but they didn't change how I felt. Understanding Jake's pride didn't make his humiliation of me any less painful. "I think I should go," I said, standing up. "I will come back for my things." "Elijah, please, he didn't mean—" "He meant exactly what he said, Allison. And now I know where I stand. It is actually a relief in some ways." I went back inside, ignoring the stairs as I headed straight upstairs to the guest room where I was supposed to be staying. I packed quickly, throwing clothes into my suitcase without bothering to fold them. From downstairs, I could hear raised voices, my mother's distress, my father's deeper tones trying to calm her. When I came back down with my suitcase, the entire family was gathered in the entryway. My mother stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Elijah, please don't leave. It is Christmas. We can work this out. I think it is better if I go, Mom. I will call you tomorrow." As I moved toward the door, various relatives called out, "Please listen to us. Don't go, Elijah. Jake didn't mean it. Jake himself stood silently by the living room door, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He made no move to stop me, offered no apology. I walked out to my car, threw my suitcase in the back seat, and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I could see them all spilling onto the porch, watching me leave. All except Jake. The 3-hour drive back to my apartment in Indianapolis gave me plenty of time to think. By the time I arrived home, it was evening on Christmas Day. My pristine modern apartment had never felt so empty. I hadn't bothered to put up a tree or any decorations, assuming I would be at my parents' house for the holiday. I placed the envelope with Jake's rent check on my kitchen counter and stared at it. All that goodwill, all that hope for reconciliation, reduced to a piece of paper that now seemed meaningless. For the next week, I ignored calls and texts from my family. My mother left tearful voicemails. My father's messages were brief and awkward, clearly prompted by my mother. Jake didn't reach out at all, which didn't surprise me. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction. Even though my company was officially closed between Christmas and New Year's, being the founder meant I always had access. I worked 14-hour days answering emails, refining code planning for the upcoming quarter, anything to avoid thinking about what had happened. On New Year's Eve, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment, I considered not answering. But when it rang again, more insistently, I relented. To my surprise, my parents stood in the hallway looking tired and nervous. "Can we come in?" my father asked. I stepped aside, too shocked to refuse. "We drove down this morning," my mother explained, as they settled awkwardly on my couch. "We couldn't let this go on any longer." "There's nothing to discuss," I said flatly. Jake made his feelings clear. "He is going through a very difficult time," my father began. "So that gives him the right to humiliate me in front of the entire family," I interrupted. "I was trying to help him." "We know that, sweetheart," my mother said. "And you need to know that things have gotten worse since Christmas. Allison broke up with him the day after you left. She said she couldn't be with someone who would treat his own brother that way." That surprised me. Allison had seemed supportive of Jake on the porch. "He is also being evicted next week," my father added. "He hasn't paid rent in 2 months, not just the 1 month he told us about." "That's not my problem anymore," I said, though a part of me still cared despite everything. I tried to help. He threw it back in my face. "We're not asking you to help him financially," my mother clarified. "We're just asking you to talk to him. He is not in a good place, Elijah. We're worried about him." I shook my head. I'm always supposed to be the bigger person. Always supposed to understand, to forgive, to reach out. What about him? When does Jake have to take responsibility for his actions? My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "We know we haven't always been fair to you," my father said finally, the admission clearly difficult for him. "We expected more from you because you could handle it. Jake always needed more support." "So I get punished for being capable?" I asked. "That's messed up, Dad." "It is," he agreed, surprising me. "And we're sorry. But right now, we're just asking you to talk to your brother. Not forgive him, not help him, just talk." I didn't agree to anything when they left, but their visit left me unsettled. For the first time, my father had acknowledged the unequal treatment that had shaped my childhood. It wasn't enough to erase years of hurt, but it was something. 2 weeks later, there was another unexpected knock at my door. This time, when I opened it, Jake stood there looking worse than he had at Christmas, unshaven with dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same Ohio State hoodie he had worn for years. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual confidence. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. Jake walked into my apartment, his eyes scanning the modern furniture, the large windows, with a view of the city, all the trappings of the success he had mocked. "Nice place," he said, but without the sarcasm I expected. "What do you want, Jake?" I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. He sat heavily on my couch, looking around as if searching for the right words. I got evicted, he said finally. I heard. Mom and Dad told you. He looked disappointed, but not surprised. I am staying on Tom's couch for now. Tom was his friend since high school, a guy who had always enabled Jake's worst tendencies. Again, what do you want? I pressed. I did not come for money, he said quickly, defensively. I thought I should apologize. For Christmas. Did Mom make you come here? No, he insisted. Then hesitated. Well, she suggested it. But I wanted to come. I crossed my arms, waiting. What I said was out of line, he continued when I didn't respond. I was a jerk. Yes, you were. His face hardened momentarily, that familiar flash of anger when he didn't get the easy forgiveness he expected. But then, surprisingly, it passed. I was embarrassed, he admitted. Having my little brother bail me out in front of everyone, it made me feel like a failure. So you decided to humiliate me instead. It was a reflex. A really stupid one. He ran a hand through his unwashed hair. I have been screwing up a lot lately. I was trying to help Jake. That's all. I know. And I threw it back in your face because I couldn't handle being the one who needed help, especially from you. What's that supposed to mean, especially from me? I asked the question that had been eating at me since Allison used similar words. Jake looked uncomfortable. You've always been the smart one, the responsible one, the one who had it together. I was supposed to be the successful one, the one everyone looked up to, but that never happened. And now you're this big shot, and I am. His voice cracked slightly. I am nothing. The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. In all our years, I had never heard Jake admit vulnerability like this. You're not nothing, Jake. You've just hit a rough patch. A rough patch, he laughed bitterly. My entire adult life has been a rough patch. Ever since my knee blew out, I have been waiting for something to click for my real life to start. Meanwhile, you went out and built something real. It wasn't easy, I told him. You only see the results, not what it took to get here. I know. That is what Allison kept telling me, that I only saw what I wanted to see. She seemed nice, I offered. I am sorry that ended. My fault, like everything else. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. I really am sorry, Elijah. Not just for Christmas, for a lot of things. For a moment, I saw my brother clearly, not the golden boy who had overshadowed my childhood, not the bitter man who had lashed out at Christmas, but someone lost, and hurting, and afraid. I had spent so many years wanting him to acknowledge my pain that I had missed how much he was in pain himself, but I wasn't ready to comfort him yet. He needed to feel this to sit with the consequences of his actions. I appreciate the apology, I said finally, but I am not sure where we go from here. Jake nodded, wiping his face with his sleeve. I don't know either. I just knew I needed to say it. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of decades of complicated feelings between us. I don't need your money, Jake said eventually, but I do need a job. A real one, not another temporary gig that will disappear in a few months. I thought about it. I had connections, people who might be willing to take a chance on Jake if I vouched for him. I might be able to help with that, I said cautiously. My friend Brian runs a construction management company. He is always looking for people with hands-on experience who can supervise sites. But Jake, I looked him directly in the eyes. If I recommend you, you can't screw this up. This would be a real opportunity, not a handout. I won't, he said quickly then, more deliberately, I promise. I didn't fully believe him yet, but it was a start. That conversation with Jake marked the beginning of a slow, sometimes painful rebuilding of our relationship. I called Brian the next day, and he agreed to interview Jake for a position. To Jake's credit, he showed up, prepared, got the job, and worked harder than I had ever seen him work at anything. We started meeting for coffee every Saturday morning. At first, our conversations were awkward and superficial, but gradually, as weeks turned into months, we began to talk about real things. I always thought you had it easy. Jake admitted one morning, stirring his coffee absently. Being the smart one, not having all the pressure to perform. And I always thought you had it easy, I replied. Being the favorite, getting all the attention and praise. He looked genuinely surprised. You thought I was the favorite, weren't you? You got the bigger room, the car, the celebrations for every game. Yeah, but you got the freedom. No one expected you to be the next great thing. Do you know how terrified I was every game, that I would disappoint everyone? And then when I got injured, it felt like I lost my entire identity overnight. These revelations came slowly, one coffee at a time. I shared my own insecurities too, how I had always felt invisible at family gatherings, how I had pushed myself to succeed partly to prove my worth, how lonely it sometimes felt to be the independent one. By the time Easter rolled around, we had established something new between us. Not the close brotherhood of childhood, not the competitive tension of our teens and 20s, but a cautious, mutual respect that felt more authentic than anything we had shared before. The family Easter gathering was at my aunt's house that year. I arrived first, Jake pulling up just minutes later. We walked in together, and I could feel the tension in the room as everyone noticed clearly, wondering if there would be another scene. Jake cleared his throat. Before we start, I want to say something. The room went quiet. I owe my brother an apology, he said, his voice stronger than I expected. What I said at Christmas was wrong. Elijah was trying to help, and I was too proud and too insecure to accept it graciously. I am sorry not just to him, but to all of you who had to witness that. I could see my mother tearing up in the corner. My father nodded approvingly. And I want everyone to know, Jake continued, that Elijah did help me, but not with money. He helped me get a real job with a future, not because we're brothers, but because he believed I could do it. He turned to me, and I won't let you down. It was my turn to be surprised. I hadn't expected such a public acknowledgement. I have something for you too, I said, reaching into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a business card with the logo of my company. How do you feel about a partnership? We're launching a new division focused on smart home construction. We need someone who understands the practical side of building, not just the technology. Jake stared at the card. Are you serious? Completely. This isn't charity. It is a business decision. You know construction. I know tech. Together we could build something important. He took the card, a smile spreading across his face, a genuine smile I hadn't seen in years. That Easter marked a turning point. Jake and I started working together on the new division, which combined his practical knowledge of construction with my technological expertise. It wasn't always smooth. We still disagreed, still had moments of falling back into old patterns, but we were building something together both professionally and personally. Jake started therapy, which surprised me more than anything. Turns out he told me losing your identity as the golden boy athlete and then having to rebuild from scratch leaves some issues to work through. I found a therapist too, working on my own need for validation and tendency to retreat from conflict. Our parents watched this transformation with a mixture of relief and amazement. At one family dinner, my father raised his glass in a toast. To my sons, he said, who finally figured out they're stronger together than apart. It has been a year since that disastrous Christmas gift exchange. The sealed envelope, with 3 months of rent that Jake rejected, has been replaced by something far more valuable: mutual respect. I stopped trying to be needed by my family and started focusing on being respected instead. Jake stopped trying to be the hero and started being honest about his struggles. The greatest gift wasn't what was in the envelope, but the painful truth that came out when it was opened. Sometimes, rejection is protection. Protection from continuing patterns that don't serve us. Protection from relationships built on false foundations. Looking back, I can almost be grateful for Jake's harsh words that Christmas. They forced us to confront decades of resentment, comparison, and misunderstanding. They cleared the way for something authentic to grow in its place. So, if you are struggling with family dynamics that seem impossible to change, remember that sometimes the most painful moments can lead to the most profound healing. Have you ever had a relationship completely transform after a conflict? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, true family bonds aren't about financial help or obligation. They're about mutual respect and understanding. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you healing in all your relationships.